Good.
Following up. Roger roll, Atlantis.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight sound lead off. Bring in, lead off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
What is up, my fellow nerds? Welcome to the second NASA spaceflight episode of the year. Happy New Year to everybody. I am Jack Beyer. Let me get a 5x5 in chat, and I already see him. Thank you so much, everybody. Everyone's saying we're coming through loud and clear. Like I said, I'm Jack Beyer with NASA spaceflight, commentator, host, guy with camera, and cat, apparently. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us on this fine Sunday. And, of course, you can see to my right, or, oh God, to my right, we have Thomas Burghardt, news director? That's the title, right? I always botch this.
Yep.
What's up, Thomas?
Not much. How's it going, Jack? Good to be back on NSF Live for the new year.
Indeed. It's already January 9th, which is like, please, time, slow down. And, of course, on my left, did I do it? I did it wrong again!
No.
It's Adrian. What's up, Adrian?
Yeah,
Bad
happy
camera
New
directions.
Year, everybody. Glad to be back on NSF Live, and hope everyone has a great start into this year.
Chad is saying 3x3 beards. So we are full up on beards. We are good to go. All right, so as you guys know, this is our weekly question and answer show where we go over the recent events of the week and y'all can ask questions. So if you have any questions while we're chatting, throw them in chat, just at NASASpaceflight, and we will see what you have asked. But try to kind of keep it, on topic. If we're talking about James Webb, which we're about to do in a moment here, don't necessarily ask a Starship question during James Webb unless it's like, could James Webb be serviced by? Anyways, keep
Could
it on
James
topic.
Webb service Starship?
Yeah,
That's
it could.
a question.
It could.
It could.
But no, for real. Please ask your questions. We love answering your questions, and your best chance of getting a question answered is if it is relevant to the topic at hand. All right. Well, with all of the maintenance sort of things taken care of and the intro done, how about we talk about James Webb, which nerds everywhere yesterday breathed a sigh of relief as James Webb is now fully deployed. I feel like I should have a confetti cannon or something to like fire off, like, yes, it's fully deployed.
Yeah.
Thomas.
Right. So yesterday, that final milestone was the second of the two wing mirrors fully deploying, which means that all of the major deployment steps have been successfully completed. All of the different mirrors, the sun shield, the antennas, all of those different components have all unfolded and latched into their proper positions. And that is something like 80% of the mission risk has been retired already. There were lots of those single point failures in those deployment sequences. Not all of them are finished because some of them also relate to specific instruments coming online. However, those points of failures would not, nullify the entire mission. They could only affect a particular instrument or something. So a lot of risk has been retired up to this point. The spacecraft is still on its way to the L2 point. And won't get there for about another 2 weeks. So for now, the spacecraft is completing that transition. It's also starting to cool down now that that sun shield has been deployed. It's going to operate down at a very cool temperature of just 6 Kelvin. So it's going to take a while to get there. There's also about 6 months of commissioning that happens while they check out the various systems and bring instruments online and things like that. Because we're not expecting those first images until middle of this year. So there is lots of work to do, and as you can see, a big shout out to NASA putting together this webpage that we're showing here with the live telemetry and just showing the progress of the telescope. There's a lot of work left to be done, but it's a big milestone to get fully deployed and retire all of that risk, and we can focus on cooling down, bringing instruments online, commissioning, and getting ready for the first images. It's very, very exciting.
It just makes me so happy. Imagine if no, I don't even want to say it. I'm just happy. Let's see. I'm gonna pick out some questions here. Here's one that I like. It's kind of like among the. We have a cool video here. Is this gonna be the deploy sequence?
Yeah, this is a
Yes.
deploy animation.
Yeah. So they folded out the first thing was the solar panel, right?
Yep.
There you can see that happening there. And while that goes, how about we do some questions? unless anybody really feels like doing a play-by-play of the deploy. I mean, that's sun shield parts going out. Let's see.
I can only say that as soon as the sun shield went out and we got the confirmation that the sun shield is out, that was like my first point of relief during this deployment sequence when I was like, okay, this might go good. Like, I feel like that was the first part, and now with the mirror, that's really the part where you start thinking about, okay, what will this might bring us in a few months?
Yeah, I mean, this thing was tested and tested and tested and tested, and of course, they couldn't fully replicate the zero-G environment it was going to be, existing in out there at L2. But I think part of the reason why we were also worried is because Hubble famously launched and had that issue with its mirror that had to have a shuttle mission go to and correct. And as we know, currently there's not a way to send anything out to L2 to have James Webb be serviced. That might be something way off in the future, potentially, maybe, but not really currently in the cards. So to have it be fully deployed is just such a relief. And I think my final sigh of relief will be when we get first images off of it, because then we'll know. Okay, the really good science that we've all been waiting decades for is coming.
Absolutely.
When are those first images? Did we already say that, or when are those supposed to come down?
Yeah,
Do we have a timeline?
We don't have a very specific timeline because it depends on how the commissioning all goes, so there's wiggle room there. Somewhere in the middle of this year is what we're currently expecting. But again, it depends on how the commissioning phase goes, and that lasts about 6 months. So
very cool. So we have a question here from Aeroflow saying, and this one is like, this is core to what we do and the things that we study in spaceflight. They say, I've heard people talk about James Webb being able to look back into the times of the Big Bang. How can that be possible? And that, my friend, is because of the speed of light. The depressingly slow, counterintuitively enough, the depressingly slow speed of light. It's because when something is so far away, it takes billions of years for the light to get to us. So we're seeing billion-a-year-old light. And right now, at this very moment, that thing that emitted that light looks very different, could possibly not even be there anymore in its same form. But the fact is, it took so long for the light to get to us. When we're able to see light that's that dim with that big of a mirror, we're seeing very, very, very old light. Is that a sufficient explanation?
Right, yeah, and
I would agree.
The reason we talk about this specifically with James Webb is just because it is the most powerful space telescope yet. And so, yeah, basically, when you have bigger mirrors and better instruments, you eventually are seeing more, you are able to take in more light, which means you're seeing older light, which means you're seeing light that is from a more distant point in the past. So you're seeing events closer and closer to the Big Bang in that sense.
Yep. And part of why James Webb is able to see so far back, even further than Hubble, is the big mirror, right? It's a much, much bigger mirror. But also, it's because it's an infrared telescope, right? And part of how we see light, there's a shifting of light. It's called redshift. And the older the light is, the more to the red side of the spectrum it gets shifted.
Exactly.
And that is suited better for infrared observation. I'm like so not a scientist, but I barely understand this stuff.
Not a telescopeologist?
Yeah, right. I'm a telescoponomer. You deep cut. That's a deep cut. Let's see. Austin is saying it's super exciting that they announced that James Webb will be active for 20 years, right? That's because Ariane 5 did such a good job with the insertion.
I think what I think what they said is they have propellant for 20 years, right? So that in theory, so to be stable at the L2 Lagrange point, they need propellant to keep it there. And because of the insertion by Ariane 5 and CAT, and the flawless launch, it could have propellant for up to 20 years. Of course, there's other things you always have to consider when you operate a telescope such a long time, but it's great that they, in theory, have the propellant to operate it there for 20 years. Like, that's a long time for this telescope to operate, in theory.
Yeah, that makes me very happy.
And that'll be continuously evaluated over the course of the mission. The design lifespan was 10 years, but given a very good orbital insertion by Ariane 5, and just the fact that those course correction burns have been pretty minimal, The current analysis says actually we're looking at about 20 years. Obviously, it's not like the insertion produced exactly 10 more years of lifespan. You know, that's an estimate. So as the mission continues, they're going to continue to evaluate. As it conducts its whatever maneuvers it needs to, they're still going to try to reserve as much propellant as possible because that is really the limiting commodity as far as how long the mission can last. And of course, the longer it lasts, the more science we get out of it. As we mentioned, the idea of going out and servicing it in about 20 years is a lot more feasible than servicing it in about 10 years. So honestly, one of the more exciting things about the fact that it will likely have propellant on board lasting for about twice as long as designed to means that the feasibility of having a spacecraft ready to go out there and refuel it to last even longer is not inconceivable. Obviously, there are other aspects to it. You have to develop some sort of vehicle, whether it's a robotic vehicle, such as Northrop's mission extension vehicle kind of deal, or if you want a crewed EVA servicing mission with a Starship or something. Um, those are both options. And it also depends on if there are other systems that need servicing, so actual repair work or just maintenance, other than just simply refueling the tanks. So obviously, all depends on what happens in the next 10, 20 years, but it is a very positive sign that the propellant reserves are looking to be even better than intended.
Yeah, and it's just it's a lot on our various streams. More data is more better, but I think I'll take the opportunity to say more science is more
Yes.
better. That just makes me very, very happy. Let's go through some more questions, y'all. If you have James Webb questions, now is the time. Somebody is asking, let's see, where was that? Joachim? Joachim? I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. I'm surely am. They say, do we know what the first images from James Webb will be? Like, what will be the first shot that they're gonna try? Is there like a calibration galaxy out there that we that we point at?
I don't think they've revealed, and correct me if I'm wrong, I do not believe like the first observations have been like announced or anything like that, and I'm not sure they even would before like instruments are commissioned and things like that. But I don't think we know.
I'm pretty
Cool.
sure they have like some ideas.
I'm sure.
what
Yeah,
they
I'm sure the
might
teams
want
know.
to do.
Oh yeah.
It's we don't know. It's a surprise, a nice summer surprise, hopefully.
If you wanted
But
to
we'll see.
guess, I think it would make sense that they would point it at something that has already been very well studied by Hubble and predecessor telescopes.
That would make
That
sense.
that way they can sort of get a feel for, we know it looks like this with Hubble, it looks like this with James Webb, and then they can dial in all the bits and bobs and make sure they're seeing as expected. I think that would make sense. So maybe if you want to speculate on your own, figure out something that Hubble has looked really closely at, and then go from there. But of course, James Webb is not a visual spectrum telescope. It's an infrared telescope, so don't expect the same kind of images off of it, which sort of leads us into this next question here. Where is it? Randomize is saying, I would love them to repeat the famous deep sky image that was taken by the Hubble to see if there's anything they missed. Now, again, it's not a visual spectrum telescope, if I'm
Right.
even saying that right. It's an infrared telescope. So can they do a deep field or something similar with James Webb, or maybe augment the Hubble deep field with data from James
I
Webb?
mean, yeah, you could absolutely point at the same patch of sky. The image would look very different. But yeah, I mean, it would be just it would be a different observation of the same patch of sky. But if you take the two together, that is, like you said, augmenting those two observations of the same field is a useful thing, and I think something that will be part of James Webb's mission. But um, it would look different than the deep. Like it wouldn't be like, oh look, there's something that didn't show up in the first one. Like it would be completely different.
Yep. Very cool. Let's see. Michael, this is a pretty easy question here, but I think it's worth answering. Michael is asking, does the cost of designing James Webb Space Telescope to be refueled compare to the cost of replacing it? I think it makes a lot of sense to design it to be refueled, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with this one was expensive, so
and granted, building a second one would be cheaper because you remove the development cost, you just have the manufacturing cost. Yeah. But refueling would be ridiculously cheaper. I mean, if you just use the mission extension vehicles as a baseline, those are on the order of a ComSat launch, which is, in spaceflight terms, dirt cheap. There would be extra requirements to go out to L2 and work with James Webb, but yeah, not even close.
Also, with these kinds of projects, they're always talking about risk and having to deploy this kind of thing again, and having to do all of these steps again, or just, I mean, there's risk with refueling, but I bet they would love to not deploy this again in the future.
Sure enough.
I mean, of course, we're all looking forward to the next telescope, though. And this is almost giving me anxiety because, like, oh, okay, I was real nervous for James Webb. It works so well, fantastic. Then we say, wait, the next one, is it Louvre or Louvre? I don't know how it's
Louvre.
pronounced. That one is even bigger, and I go, oh, great. I'm sure that won't be stressful at all when that launches.
Yeah, actually, you read my mind, Thomas. The next question I wanted to highlight here was from Lucas158_, who's saying, "What are your thoughts on the Louvre telescope?" And I'm all that one is an actual like direct successor to Hubble, right? Am I correct about that, or is it also infrared?
Yeah, it's optical. I'm pretty sure it should be an optical telescope because I think the O in Louvre even stands for optical, right? Like
Very cool.
Visual.
I don't know that.
Oh
so
no,
I'm
it's
taking
infrared.
Oh.
No, it's infrared. I'm looking right now in the Wikipedia page.
Forgive me for that. But either way, it's an even bigger telescope than James Webb, and will provide.
It looks very similar to James Webb. It's got a very
Yep.
big deployable sun shield, a hexagonal mirror, but it's bigger.
Isn't like the
and-
plan to have up to 15 meters of mirror?
I believe so.
That's wild.
And that's a mission that could be taking advantage of the Starship payload bay, because that would be the new largest payload volume. And then again, unfolding to an even bigger, like it wouldn't be a 9-meter diameter mirror. So yeah, it would be very cool.
Oh, is this
Louvre?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Oh yeah, it is. Yep.
Wow.
You can
So
even
you can see similar but slightly different. The sun shield is not like a diamond; it's more of a square. But you see that secondary mirror deploys very similar. The different wing mirrors.
It's like Ultra James Webb. It's James Webb but on steroids. Very cool.
So that is kind of like, and this is like a far off. This is like decades from now, I think.
Yeah,
Like,
it's important to note that James Webb took what, like 25 years or some insane amount of time
Yeah.
for it to go from initial funding and development to actually launching. So, I mean, again, just like the depressingly slow speed of light, we have to accept that the human timescales on these things is kind of unfortunate. But sometime when we're all old and this whole thing is gray and we're grizzled old space fans, we'll get another telescope called Louvre, and that should be pretty darn cool. Let's see. Satik or Satvik is asking, what is the material that the sun shield on James Webb is made of? Is that like a mylar type material?
oh
I think it's
gosh.
Kapton with aluminium.
Thank you.
It should be Kapton with an aluminium coat, like something like that, if I remember it correctly. But I'm giving Thomas right now time to Google
keep
it.
stalling, keep stalling.
Vamp.
And I think there's also a silicon on the sun-facing side to support the reflection to the sun. But I'm still stalling here.
Wallace.
I'm running out of topics. I can.
In chat,
NASA's
Thomas,
page is
how
not
is it-
getting to the point here.
Chat is saying that you're right,
NASA.
Adrian. It's
Okay,
Capcom.
there you go. Well done, Adrian. Proud of you.
This is why we
Oh,
pay
yeah,
you.
I finally just found it. Yes, good job. Nicely done.
Very cool.
This is like 5 scrolls down the page of about the sun shield. Thanks, NASA.
Thanks, NASA. And let's see. Gonna check a couple more of these things here. RVW is asking, what do you mean by instruments need to be commissioned?
Right. So, not every it's not as simple as like, oh, there's one camera that receives the light from the mirror, and that's how you do all your scientific observations. There are lots of different computers and cameras on board that take the light from the telescope and use it for scientific observations, and none of those have actually been powered on yet. Some of those have operating temperature requirements, which is part of the telescope cooling down to its proper temperature. And then some of them need to be powered on in specific sequences and have their power requirements met, all of those kind of things. And so step by step, they go through them kind of one at a time to power them on, make sure they're operating properly. Also part of the commissioning will be aligning the mirrors. I didn't mention this. Each of the hexagons in the big James Webb mirror are independently actuated. So you can, and that's how you focus the telescope. So that's going to be part of the commissioning phase, is actually focusing the reflections to make sure that the light is being received properly. and that's part of the commissioning phase. So there's other steps that have to be taken before the instruments can actually start conducting scientific observations and produce those first images. So that's what we're talking about: reaching operating temperature, focusing the mirror, and then powering on each of the individual instruments and checking them all out.
Very cool. Here's one. We're gonna do a couple more James Webb Telescope questions here, and then we'll move on to the next topic. But this is a big deal. It fully deployed, everybody. Like,
Yeah.
again, confetti cannon.
Yeah.
Like, let's recognize this for what it is. It's a big deal. So let's do some more questions. Really quickly though, Mark, thank you for the support there. They say tell the cat I said hi. Thelma says hi. Let's see, Moldy Space, of course, chiming in with the Thomas fan club, and James Webb Space Telescope distressing time. Andrew R, thanks for the support, and saying cat. Thomas, thank you for the support. They're asking about James Webb's life, and we already talked about that, so thank you, Thomas. Musical Wolves, thank you for the support. Got a couple more here. Sneezy Ferret, they say jumping into the far future. Do you think they will refuel James Webb after 10 plus years? I heard that they made the fuel tank successful. We were talking about that earlier. I think it's absolutely a possibility, right?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the development of a system to actually be able to go and do that, but there are both robotic and crewed options that would conceivably be developed, and it depends on how the mission goes over the next 10 to 20 years. But I believe that that is something that NASA will be very much interested in, and in fact, after the mission, like once it's fully deployed and everything, the main engineering focus for the mission will turn to, all right, how can we develop the ability to go service it and refuel it to keep supporting the mission? So, absolutely.
Very cool.
And to be fair, that would also honestly apply to Hubble. If you develop that capability to James Webb, the idea of going and attaching a mission extension vehicle to Hubble to take over attitude control and things like that is also not out of the question. We could continue operating Hubble for even more years. And of course, Hubble is already beyond its design lifespan, but that's an option too. It's a very similar capability, so worth mentioning.
NASA has a history of extending missions beyond their original life design, so
And that's
that
a
would be
result.
very
I mean,
on brand.
For part of it, that's just a result of engineering margins, right? You design everything to say, okay, here's our minimum requirement. This is our design lifespan, right? And you're going to design it with X percentage of margin or whatever factor of safety so that you can ensure a certain degree of confidence that you'll meet the design requirement. But as a result, when you have talented engineers working on these teams, that margin ends up being more reliable, pretty reliable, and thus the actual time that you expect the mission to last is well beyond your design lifespan. So it's kind of the design lifespan is usually a pretty conservative estimate anyway, but you launch the mission with the understanding that if it only lasts the design lifespan, that's still a successful mission and you still have gotten enough science to be worth the mission. But well, more times than not, you get even more than you planned on, which is of course excellent.
Yeah, I really appreciate how that's sort of a thing in spaceflight is we'll give you a conservative estimate, and if everything goes perfectly, we're going to blow that estimate out of the water. It's like you open up a present, and somehow the thing in the box is bigger than the box that you opened. It's just like, yes!
The only thing that is running against this are launch estimates when something will launch. That's the only thing
True.
that will never be
Launch dates do
conservative.
not apply to that rule.
Yeah, absolutely not. Musical Wolves asking, can Hubble be used to check James Webb health status if the mirrors, and I just lost it, darn it. I don't know if Hubble could image James Webb. That would be kind of insane, huh?
Yeah, remember that space telescopes are designed to focus on objects at certain distances, and James Webb is not at the same distance as distant galaxies that Hubble images. I'm not sure it's really possible to image anything in any useful way at those distances.
Very cool.
You could design a spacecraft with the goal of optically inspecting other spacecraft, but you wouldn't use Hubble for that.
Yeah, and let's not go further down that path, lest the FBI bust in all of our rooms simultaneously. Hamster Space Nerd, thank you so much for the support. They say, so James Webb is going to L2. Does it need to perform orbital maintenance like a ComSat needs to? I mean, that's what the propellant is for, right?
Yeah, it's minimal, like it's station keeping propellant, but there's an insertion burn, which is kind of the next major milestone. outside of commissioning, the next big mission step will actually be conducting the burn that places it in its orbit around the L2 point, and then just maintaining its stability around that point in space requires propellant every once in a while. It's pretty minimal, which is why, I mean, you don't see any giant fuel tanks when you look at James Webb because it's very minimal propellant requirements, and that small amount of propellant that is in there will apparently last about 20 years. So it's minimal, but yes, that's what that's for.
What propellant are we talking about here? Is that hydrazine or?
I believe, yeah, it is some
Yeah.
storable propellant, most likely hydrazine, off the top of my head, yeah.
Makes sense. Black Game, thank you so much for becoming a launch director member. If you guys don't know, we've got a membership program that allows you to support what we do on an ongoing basis. It comes with various perks like chat emoji. I'm going to throw a Tory heavy into chat. That's a rare one these days. Oh, it's a Tory super heavy. But yeah, you get chat emoji, you get various levels of support. You get preview videos that go live before the dailies do. You get pictures from Nick and Mary out in the field. And at Capcom level and above, you get Discord access. And suffice to say, I won't talk your ear off about it, but none of what we're able to do would be possible without that membership program and without all of our amazing members. So thank you so much for becoming a member there, Black Game. And we appreciate especially the fact that you're a launch director member. Also, cool perk, launch directors and flight engineers get their name at the end of NSF Live episodes. We'll put that up there, and you can have your place in the sun, as it were. So let's see. Two more of these here. Freddie, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. Nice and on topic. Nice timing there, buddy. And Luis saying Louvre is not meant to replace James Webb, but complement it in the future. It'll be able to capture images in the UV spectrum. So very cool. And as I say that, I see that there's some chopsticks action in Boca Chica, which we will get to in a moment here. Of course, we're going to talk about Starship, but first, I think we should move on from James Webb and move on here to the first launch of the year from SpaceX, right?
Which will tie into Starship as well, so we'll get to that in a second.
Okay, perfect. I love segues. Look how smooth that segue was. It's especially smooth when you mention the segue. That makes it extra smooth. So, Adrian, you want to talk to us about Starlink Group 4 or 5?
Yes, SpaceX kicked off the year with the first Starlink launch and the first orbital launch in general on this planet this year. They launched 49 satellites to a 53.2 degrees inclination on board of B1062, which had its fourth flight, I think. It also launched, for example, the Inspiration 4 mission and touched down successfully on a shortfall of gravitas after inserting the second stage into what it was supposed to do. Also, it went down the southeastward trajectory from Cape Canaveral, which was very special about this launch because that trajectory it has not used for, I think, even decades, right?
Yeah, it is very rare when going to these mid-inclination orbits to fly southeast from Cape Canaveral. Normally you fly northeast, and this is to usually avoid overflying the Bahamas. So there was actually a slight dogleg maneuver conducted by the upper stage, which I don't think SpaceX ever officially confirmed the reasoning. The speculation is that recovery conditions out in the ocean are more favorable in the southern Atlantic Ocean, and so they were making that trade-off there. But I don't think we get an official word from that. But that was a bit of a unique aspect of this launch, and part of why there was only 49 satellites as opposed to 53 like before.
Very cool. But this isn't the dreaded polar corridor, though, right? It's just a dogleg.
It's not technically the polar corridor. It's a different southeastern trajectory. So not taking away anything from Vandenberg or anything on this launch.
Good, because I will rage quit right here now.
I mean, well, we have to mention what the next Falcon 9 launch is, which is using the dreaded polar launch corridor. Sorry, Jack.
Yay, segues.
Yes. Transporter 3, right?
Yep, coming up on Thursday. That'll be exciting because we are expecting a return to launch site landing back at Landing Zone 1. So us here on the Space Coast are very excited to see that happen. It is a directly south trajectory through the polar launch corridor, which I will say by name because Jack brought it up. And that launches at 10:25 a.m. Eastern Time on Thursday. 15:25 UTC is the next next SpaceX Falcon 9 launch, and the next launch from Cape Canaveral.
You say you'll say it by name, but is there like a Jack-friendly euphemism for the polar? Is it like the ones that go the way that is that we don't talk about. Like there's got to be a.
The launch corridor that shall not be named.
There we go. Perfect. Don't you take my polar launches. Look at that. The chopsticks are doing their thing.
Right, and the segue I wanted to make is that the big Starship news this week, in addition to Chopsticks testing, has been related to Starlink. And of course, while we're anxiously watching all of this ground testing with the Chopsticks and the vehicles themselves and getting ready for this orbital test flight that will hopefully happen in the coming months, that is in preparation for the first payload flights, which are expected to be Starlink satellites. And we got a lot of new information about the type of satellites that Starship will be launching on those first test flights, which I'd be happy to get into while we keep an eye on the chopsticks, which of course are those catch arms that'll be used for stacking and actually catching vehicles, which is one of these days it'll seem not crazy, probably, just like landing rockets propulsively no longer seems crazy.
100%.
It still seems crazy to me, and I'm going to still act like it is crazy because I think it is. But, good luck, SpaceX.
That's like the most poisoned good luck ever. Good luck to you. I don't believe it, but good luck.
Yeah, I've learned the lesson to like not just say like, oh yeah, that'll never work, because that's not a thing you say when SpaceX engineers try to do something. But it's such a bizarre concept, and I love it.
I'm with you, by the way. I'm completely 100% with you. I'm team. If this works, great. I will cheer. I will scream. I will be excited. But until then, I remain like, how you want to land this and catch it with two arms.
The fun part is it's not like, if you look at the data that we have, even just as the public, it's really not that crazy. I mean, look at how Falcon 9 lands dead center in the middle of the drone ship every single time. If you go back and you look at the Starship test flights, they hit the landing pad every single time. They are very good at accurately landing. Now, of course, does that mean they're good enough with their accuracy to hit two little chopstick flapping around arm things? I don't know. But fact of the matter is Starship is being built and rethought from first principles to be unlike previous launch vehicles and to be rapidly reusable. And when you're doing that, you don't just make the same thing that everyone else has made or the same thing that you yourself has made, like a rocket with legs. If they want to achieve the flight rates with Starship that they have stated that they want to achieve, it will require something that on its face seems crazy like this. But like you said, Thomas, in time will ideally, all things panning out, become sort of normal in the same way that propulsive landing was wild at first, and now we don't even second guess it. And people don't even care when a booster comes into port on a barge, which is still, to me, the wildest thing.
Sure.
Yeah, I had that with the recent Starlink launch. I was just like, we are at the point, I feel, with Falcon 9 where you just expect it to land, and like it feels so weird if something goes wrong, or if something is like slightly off, or a booster is leaning, for example. Like, that feels weird at this point, because it just, you expect it to be like go perfectly and go well. That's kind of crazy in itself.
Yeah, one of my favorite
I have
things...
a question on that front, and
Go for it.
there is potential. Do you think that 2022? I'm going to ask a prediction question because it's on topic. Do you think that 2022 will be the first year since 2017 without a Falcon landing failure?
Yes.
Ooh. See,
I made that prediction before, so I say yes.
It's not a bad call to say yes, but the thing that is the counterweight to that is, as SpaceX gets more flights on boosters, they just got their first 11th flight done at the end of last year. As they do more first flights, I wonder, perhaps, maybe on the 15th flight we get a landing failure or something as they expand the envelope, because. As mature as Falcon 9 is as a launch vehicle, they're still expanding the envelope, whether that's weather conditions, whether that's the number of times a booster has flown. But you know what? I'm going to say yes. No landing failures this year. Knock on wood. Hopefully we didn't just jinx like 6 boosters.
No.
Oh, God. Flip this for the future.
Right?
This is going to not age well. I do not like what we just did.
You did it. It's your fault.
I did. I feel so bad. This is terrible.
I already have this tweet in my mind, like where you hear us talking in the background, how this year will go well, and in the foreground you see all these boosters
Yeah.
splashing into the
Does that go
ocean.
with, if that was methane, wouldn't
Oh,
it be
of
igniting?
course, of course, you had to do it. I was thinking it, but you had to do it. Oh man.
It wouldn't be the first time we jinxed something on live air. Anyway,
Yeah,
it's
right.
fine.
Especially not me. I think I've done it several times at this point. Um, Westy is asking, I'm amazed at how long the Starlink missions actually take. It seems like not very long. What is the actual mission time? I mean, the from launch to payload separation is generally pretty fast, right?
Yeah, low Earth orbit missions do not. I mean, it doesn't take long to reach low Earth orbit. Hilariously, the ones that the missions that take longer is just coasting to the right point for deployment, or if they're using the two burn profile to get some extra efficiency. Um, those just take longer because there's a coast phase in there, but it's very quick to reach low Earth orbit. And smaller rockets get there even faster because they usually have really high thrust to weight ratios. But low Earth orbit is relatively close when you're traveling at orbital velocity. That's,
Yep, makes sense. I mean, it's so crazy to me that low Earth orbit is just 80 or 100 or whatever number you want to pick miles up. Like, I wish you could just get in your car and drive straight up. And they're like, I'll be there in 2 hours. I'm gonna go to space. How great would that be?
The closest I ever was to a rocket launch is probably a Falcon 9 second stage flying over Germany.
Could you see
right.
it?
Yeah, you're closer vertically than you are like
Yeah.
to Cape Canaveral across the globe.
Yeah.
That's weird to
Way
think about.
closer.
Space.
That's, yeah.
Were you able to see that, Adrian, when that happened?
I saw it like 2 times. You can sometimes see the second stage in Europe, but most of the times not. But there is some possibilities to see the second stage in Europe in some days.
Very cool. All right, well, we're looking at the chopstick arms. We're looking at the launch tower. Do we want to talk about the Starlink news as we transition over to Boca Chica stuff and Starbase stuff? Do we want to talk about the Starlink on Starship sort of news that came out this week?
Yeah, I'll give a brief overview here. Basically, there's a new, the FCC, which is in charge of regulating all the radio frequencies and things like that that most satellite operators use, so they're involved in a lot of spaceflight approval processes. Asked SpaceX for some additional information with regards to approving various Starlink future generations and things. And just the other day, a new document of SpaceX answering some of those questions was filed. And so we have some new information about how SpaceX plans to deploy the second generation of the Starlink constellation. They call it Gen 2. It's also known as version 2.0. Right now, they're launching version 1.5 satellites on the missions that are designated group something dash something. The missions that were designated, version 1.0 L something, those are version 1.0, obviously. So there's different generations of satellites.
All of this very easy to understand and very clear
yeah.
and concise because SpaceX, as we know, is good at naming.
Dripping with sarcasm, that comment was. So some new information, and basically the big piece was there were two different configurations that SpaceX had proposed to deploying these satellites. There was configuration 1, which is optimized for Starship launches, and configuration 2, which was basically a contingency where if Starship was not ready to deploy payloads in time where they needed to get these satellites on orbit, they could use this configuration to launch them on Falcon launch vehicles, whether that's Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy. The most recent document says that they are very happy with Starship's development progress and are thus abandoning Configuration 2 and are proceeding with the primary configuration, which will be only launched on Starship. Now, this does not preclude the Starlink missions that are already happening on Falcon 9. This is pertaining to version 2.0, Gen 2 sats only. And these satellites will be ready to launch as early as March of 2022, which, to be very clear, that's like satellite readiness, if anything. Starship is probably not like conducting its orbital test flight by March of 2022. That's probably even optimistic. The fact that, and then beyond just breaching orbit for the first time, you need to have the payload bay door, which we haven't seen a whole lot of visible progress on how that will work, and then that version of Starship reaching orbit and being ready to conduct its first actual payload deployments. So all of that is forward work before they actually launch these satellites, but it gives you an idea that they will be ready to go when Starship is ready. Pretty much, it sounds like the satellites will not be the limiting factor there. So that was the big piece. Also, just a note that both Gen 1 and Gen 2 are going to be working together. The ground terminals are apparently going to work with both generations of satellites together, and the two generations kind of complement each other in that way. There's just some other kind of Q&A done between the FCC and SpaceX about these new satellites. The big news really being that they're going to be leveraging Starship on those missions, and in addition to having these larger satellites, they're also going to leverage it to fly directly into the target plane, which is the difference being Falcon 9 flights, they deploy into a lower orbit that's a parking orbit, and they drift in that orbit to the plane where the satellites will actually operate from. Whereas SpaceX says Starship will still deploy them into a lower orbit for checkout purposes, so if the satellite fails, it'll decay quickly, just like they're doing with the current satellites. But they will not drift orbital planes in that parking orbit, they'll fly directly into the orbital plane. They haven't provided a whole lot of detail into what exactly the benefits there are, because they're still going into a lower orbit, but they're just leveraging some extra Starship performance there. It's not super clear. But that's something that they mentioned in those plans. Would love to discuss that further. Um, Generally speaking, flying into a target plane isn't usually a matter of performance. It's usually a matter of launch timing. It's interesting. Maybe they're talking about conducting maneuvers on orbit or the amount of satellites that are going on any particular launch, not needing to disperse across different planes. I don't know. It's really not clear at all.
But I've seen a little bit of discussion about whether or not they could launch these Gen 2 satellites on Falcon 9. Correct me if I'm wrong, but their size, like you said, they're larger. So they're basically
Correct.
Gen 2 has to be launched on Starship, right?
Correct.
Yes.
And well, under this configuration that they're now selecting, there was this other plan that said if we needed to launch the second generation satellites on Falcon, we would have to tweak the satellite design to make that work. But they have said that we no longer worried about that. Starship will be ready to support in time in a time frame where the Generation 2 satellites can be the design that we want them to be, which is optimized for Starship. Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy cannot support the Gen 2 satellites.
Makes sense. You know what? I'm gonna do it. We can do another fun prediction thing. Do you
Oh
think
gosh, here we
Starship
go.
will launch Starlink satellites this year? I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna say yes, and I'm
I hate these.
I know I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm gonna be hopeful and say yes. What do you guys
Adrian,
think?
you go first.
Of course. Yeah, I'm gonna join the yes. I made the that might be very probably call that I think it might launch up to 5 times this year on air. Which I will 100% regret, but I did it. And
I want you to be right. For what it's worth, I really, really want.
Oh yeah,
you
it
to
would be awesome if you're right, but I think you're crazy.
I also want to be right here. So yeah, I think I hope they will launch Starlink this year on Starship.
I'll explain my thought process here because obviously everything in me wants the Starship orbital flight test to happen like this week if possible. I know that's not possible, but
Yep.
I want it as soon as possible because I'm very excited for that and I want to see more progress on the flight test program. There's a pessimistic side of me who's still not even sure Starship will get orbital flight test approval this year.
That's entirely
seems
possible. Yeah.
which of course is possible. It seems incredibly pessimistic. If I had to guess, yes, it will have an orbital flight test this year, hopefully even in the first half of this year, and then hopefully a second orbital flight at some point later this year. Could that mean that they eventually get Starlink satellites on board this year? Possibly. I think the main reason of hesitation for this question in particular is just that we haven't seen a whole lot with regards to how the payload bay will actually work.
Yep.
But it's very possible that that's just not something very visible, and it's sitting in a tent somewhere in Boca Chica, ready to go. You know,
They did.
so I'm not gonna hang on to that too much. I'm going to pessimistically, just because both of you said yes, I'm going to say no, so that if you're both wrong, at least one of us was right.
Nice.
I wouldn't be super surprised, but I could also very easily see it just happening next year with the first actual payloads on board.
I mean, you're right
I
about
think
the
both
payload
is-
door. Go ahead, Adrian.
I think that's the most interesting thing right now. It's how wide the range is of what could happen in Starbase. Like, I think we are obviously guessing here, and it depends on so many factors where we have zero clue about how they are going, especially on the regulatory side. So we don't know. We just have no idea what will happen, and it's such a wide range that comes out of this in which something could happen.
Yeah, and to your point, Thomas, that we haven't seen a lot of payload door activity. We haven't seen what that really is going to look like, but we have in recent weeks seen another payload bay door pathfinder, or what looks like one. So they are doing work on it, and I suspect that's just one of those things where they are in minimal orbit viability sort of mode, and as soon as they need a payload bay door, they'll crank one out, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, maybe they'll go through several iterations of the design of that door, but surely opening a hatch and kicking a bunch of Starlink satellites out seems like a much less of a hard task to figure out than getting Starship into orbit and back again.
In the first place, sure.
In the first place, yeah, exactly. Let's answer some questions here.
Absolutely loving our special guest on the show today.
Oh yeah,
Jack's Cat.
Thelma.
Just a quick acknowledgement that I'm just loving that part of this episode so far.
She says jinkies. I've been away from the apartment for like a day, and I get back and she's like, "Oh, friend!" So she's literally not leaving me alone. She's just climbing all over me. So I apologize if that's distracting.
No, it's perfect.
Let's see. Rob is asking, how much faster, since we're looking at the chopsticks, how much faster do you think the chopsticks can move? I mean, I imagine right now they're moving them real slow for testing purposes, and as they expand the envelope, I know I say that a lot, but as they expand their knowledge base of how they work and check out various aspects of their operation, they'll be able to move faster and faster. I'm not quite sure how fast we expect them to move in the end, though.
It'll have to be much faster than this if they're going to try and catch a landing booster. Honestly, I think they'll want stacking operations to be even faster than this too, to be honest.
Yeah.
This is clearly, I mean, this is obviously testing and everything like that. It will be very cool when we see them moving at like, I want to say flight speeds is maybe not the right word because obviously the chopsticks don't fly, but you know what I mean.
Yet.
Oh, God.
Oh, no.
How would that even work?
Wait for a booster to hit the tower and we'll see if the chopsticks can fly.
Jack's excitement when he said "yet" was like
the new exclamation during the NSF live in show. Chopsticks can fly.
Yeah. Oh, no. I'll really have to try hard to remember to yell that should that happen. But hopefully it doesn't. Yeah. Oh man, that's good stuff. Let's see. DJ Plath is asking, does anyone know how fast the Gen 2 satellites will be data rate wise, given they're using lasers now? Well, they're using lasers on 1.5 version as well, aren't they?
Right.
Yes.
I'm assuming Gen 2 also includes like bandwidth upgrades and things like that, but I do not believe I've seen any specific numbers, so I might have to get back to you on that.
Very cool.
Or someone on chat already knows and will answer it for me, which is probably more likely.
Sure enough, as usual. Thank you, chat, for being so on the ball. Gus F, thanks for becoming a Red Team member. Ghost Rider Ryan's asking the cat's name. The cat's name is Thelma, and she's a foster kitty that we're taking care of. And I don't know, maybe she'll stick around. We'll see. She's a good kitty. Let's see. Thank you for the support there, Ghost Rider Ryan. Musical Wolves asking, is there a water cooling system needed for the Chopstick Tower so it doesn't heat up too much when Super Heavy does a landing burn? I suspect we'll see the tower clad at some point, similar to how the tower at 39A has a exterior cladding, but I don't know. What do you guys think? You think they're going to just have a massive water tower at the top of the tower that just deluges the whole thing or something?
I do not think so right now. I think they are able to move them without cooling and without that. I would expect them that they had in mind when they constructed them that they are well shielded against a rocket flying next to them.
The landing burn is still relatively short duration. It's not, I don't think, a heating concern.
Makes sense. And Jim Cabot, thank you for the support. They say Packer game, NSF live, and chopsticks testing. So torn. Well, I got a tip for you, buddy. Turn off the Packer game. I'm sorry, I don't like sports ball. Anyways, you all can hate me now.
Listen, let's not talk about sports ball. It's been a rough season. All right.
All right. I'm trying furiously to remember, and I don't remember. Is it the Eagles? Whoever their rival
Packers don't
team
like
is.
the Bears.
The Bears. Let's see. Cool. So we did Starlink, and now we can fully jump in with both legs. Is that an expression? Into Starship stuff. So we're looking at the
With
chopsticks.
both arms.
There we go. Thank you.
Chopstick.
Thank you. Very, very cool. So
We're
we're
just
looking...
inventing new phrases now at this point. I love it.
my brain. I'm sorry. I've got a cat on my lap, like clawing me currently, so it's a little bit hard to keep a train of thought when I am experiencing physical pain. So Starship. Right now, we have a close-up view there on the left of the carriage, which is the system that the chopsticks attach to, and the carriage actually attaches to the tower, and that moves up and down, and so just a multitude of testing going on there in Boca Chica. I mean, we're definitely not in flight mode. I do miss the early days of and I guess middle of 2021, where we were just flying this vehicle, flying that vehicle, but all of this stuff is nonetheless critical. So there's been a lot going on in Starbase. They installed, if you guys remember, they installed those heat shield tiles on ship 20 right on the crane attach points. They pulled the crane attach points off. They installed heat shield tiles on those, and then there was that day where they did the static fire testing, and now those tiles have been removed, and ship 20 has, I think. Adrian, do you know, have they put the crane attach points back onto ship 20, or is it just tiles off?
I'm not sure. I'm totally not sure here.
Oh.
There was so much in the last few weeks on like infrastructure work and everything. I don't remember everything anymore.
That's my bad there for not knowing that ahead of time. But
Oh, same here.
let's see, other stuff that has happened in Starbase. I mean, the next thing on the list here is Mechazilla's chopsticks. Mechazilla, if you don't know, is what Elon has called the tower on Twitter. I still like Launch Tower and Catch Arms, but if we're going to go with what Elon has said, it's Mechazilla and his chopsticks. So those are being moved and tested at last, as you can see there on the left side of the screen, which is very cool because, I mean, they're going to need that functionality for stacking boosters and ships and getting into orbital flight testing.
Also, they have been reinstalled.
Crane attach points.
Point. It seems chat is informing us.
Thank you, chat. We love you. Let's see. Other stuff that's happened. The new high bay, aka the wide bay, has had level 3 is being started, and it's not necessarily like there's a level of the high bay with like a big sign that says level 3, but we've seen them assemble the pieces in large part on the ground and then lift big chunks onto the structure there. So the third set of those chunks has been going up. Shielding has been added to the orbital mount. That is a very promising sign for further testing of the orbital mount, because of course you don't want that whole structure and all the plumbing and the GSC stuff and the wiring and all that good stuff to get roasted by Raptor engines. So I'm just going to keep running through this list here. Booster 7 is being built in the high bay, and new sections for it have been moved in, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that sort of coincides with at the same time, at least in my head, and there you can see Booster 7 in the high bay there on the left, and you can see the wide bay or the new high bay on the right too, which level 3 is like practically already done.
Pretty big.
Yeah, so that's really cool. Booster 7, of course, will be a 33 engine Raptored booster. At least that's what we expect. I don't think we've seen any like close-up shots with the label of the thrust puck with the 13 engine points, but I think we're all expecting Booster 7 to sort of be a 33 engine vehicle, which might, a lot of people are asking, what's going on with Booster 5? What's going on with Booster 5? I hate to say it, and I could be wrong, but I suspect Booster 5 in a lot of the same ways as Ship 16 is just obsolete at this point. They built it. It supports 29 engines. That is not the final configuration, and now they're they no longer need Booster 5 at this point, unless of course, please know, something bad happens to Booster 4.
Although to be honest, I'm still not convinced Booster 4 will ever see flight, because they're waiting on approval. They still got to work on ground equipment. It might just work out that Booster 7's ready to go, and why test a 29 engine booster when you have a 33 one ready to go?
Yep.
And the same goes for Ship 20. They might have another ship ready to go. It all depends on how long some of these other aspects take. Obviously, we know that Booster 4 and Ship 20 is still the current plan, but the idea that could change is absolutely still a possibility.
Things change
Yeah.
super rapidly in Starbase. Go ahead, Adrian.
I think like with every day that passes and every day that is not the regulatory approval, they are not orbital
Right.
ready. Every day brings like Booster 4 and Ship 20 closer to being replaced by a newer version. Because
Yep.
why would you test an old version at some point when you have a new version ready?
Yeah, and to that point, it's wild how old Ship 20 is. Ship 20 is like
Yeah.
6 months old. And
Yeah.
at the speed that SpaceX moves in Starbase, that's just ancient at this point.
Yeah, I visited Starbase in August, and when I was there, it was after Ship 20 had rolled back to the production site after its first round of testing, and when I was there, they rolled it back out, and I'm realizing in my head that that's the same ship that's still on the pad now, which in Boca Chica time frame is weird. It's
Yep.
like weird. Why isn't that ship flown or blown up yet? You know, like
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. One wonders, how much data they'll be able to gather from the ship at this point. But of course, there's plenty of data to gather.
I mean, we think the ship is like the big thing for the booster has been the engine count change. We also know that that's also coming to the ship at some point with extra vacuum engines, but that sounds like it might not be a super near-term thing anyway. So it's possible that there isn't a whole lot of benefit to going to a new vehicle yet with Ship 20. But maybe Ship 20 gets paired with a Booster 7 or something.
If
That's a
that's
possibility.
even possible, it could be that they're not even compatible at this
That's
point.
true. Unless then, if that's changed, that's a good point. So
But the other thing besides the engine count change is the engine type change.
Right.
The 33 engined Super Heavy is made for Raptor 2, or Raptor 2 is made for that super, whatever. You get it. It's a Booster 7 is expected to be the first 33 engined Super Heavy and the first Super Heavy to support Raptor 2, the Raptor 2 variant, which is a completely different ball of wax.
Yeah.
Let's see. What
Look
else?
at chopsticks.
They're way up there.
They're so high.
Have we seen them up that high yet? I don't think so.
Nope. That's the highest they ever have been.
It's absolutely wild. I love to see new milestones in Starbase. And speaking of milestones in Starbase, I'm just going to do this. We recently put out a video of everything that's happened from December 2020 up till basically now. And if you guys want to go watch that video, I think NASASpaceflight actual Chris Bergen was going to be posting that link in chat. But that is our huge compendium of everything that's happened. It's a beefy video. It's like a 26-minute long video. If you want to go back and if maybe you missed something, or maybe there's just so much that goes on that you weren't able to keep track of what was going on in Starbase, go check out that video. We hope you like it. We're trying to do some more content like that. That's like more comprehensive, longer form videos. So we hope you like it. Go check that out after this episode. And just wanted to mention that. Let's see. Booster 3 finally getting scrapped. Finally. Speaking of Booster 7, makes me wonder, maybe they're finally scrapping Booster 3 because they want to move Booster 7 onto Pad A, where Booster 3 is currently occupying. They're going to have Booster 4 down there on the orbital launch mount, presumably used for more proof testing, more static fire testing, or initial static fire testing, I should say. But perhaps that necessitates the use of Pad A for something. But interesting to see that Booster 3 is finally being scrapped.
Even if they're not going to use the pad for something, it was just like, it was almost bothering me because it was like, what if they're still going to do something with it,
Yeah, I mean, it could have been turned into a water tower for all we knew.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That would make sense. So yeah.
Sorry, Adrian, what were you going to say?
I feel like Booster 3 takes the award for the most disliked Starship or super heavy vehicle ever being around in Starbase, because people were like, yeah, it's finally getting scrapped. And I'm like, well, okay. Since when do we want vehicles to be fully scrapped?
It's true. It's true that we're like celebrating that in a way, but Booster 3, it did its job and stuck around. It's like Booster 3 is the guy that stuck around at the party way too long, and you're like cleaning up all the red cups and like putting the trash away, and you're like, dude, you're still here? Like, go home, call an Uber, please leave. Scrap yourself. Let's see. We did chopstick testing. We talked about Booster 7. We talked about the orbital launch mount progress. Anything else in Starbase that I'm forgetting? I'm surely forgetting things. Adrian, anybody? Bueller?
I think think we should mention that there right now is a bar between the chopsticks that is used to test them. So there's some sort. It seems like they're like the mounts that they also have on vehicles to mount them to the chopsticks. That they are also on this bar that is between the chopsticks right now. So this is not only a moving test, but they are also testing the capabilities of the chopsticks to attach to these mounts and maybe hold on to them and not drop that giant bar.
Yep. Yeah,
Just
are we seeing that
ideas,
bar
yeah.
move back and forth? I haven't really been able to watch super closely. Part of me wonders, is that bar there to test some sort of, mechanism like you're talking about, or is it just sort of like a tie to hold the chopsticks together so they don't flap around or something as they're doing these lift tests?
Also me, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't know. I'm just speculating over here wildly, as I am wont to do. Let's see. Starship. I can't wait to see this thing attached to these chops. And one of the questions we get asked a lot, speaking of, I'm reminding myself that I should be looking at y'all's questions, is if the QD arm would get in the way of the chopsticks. And I think we can see here that no, the QD arm, when swung away like that, does not get in the way of the chopsticks. Let's see. I guess, I don't know, do we want to, let's do some questions really quick
Yeah,
here.
absolutely.
Stephanie Ball is asking, what's going on with ship 21, 22, and 23? Is 21 getting scrapped? Is 22 a payload test article still? Will 23 be the first ship flown with 9 engines? Are they Raptor V1 or Raptor V2? A lot of these questions are things we don't necessarily know the answer to, but we can surmise, right? Like, by now, ship 21 presumably should have gotten its nose cone. I mean, all the pieces were in place for it to move into the high bay. I think did they move it into the high bay or just outside the mid bay?
It danced around a bit. I think it went to the high bay, then back to the mid bay, then back to the high bay, and then back to the mid bay again. Like, it had some movement, but I don't know why.
Right. So at this point, we can presume that ship 21 is potentially getting scrapped, given that it has not gotten its nose cone. But who knows? That's a very good question, Stephanie. We know, of course, if you remember the events of last year, they skipped ship 12, ship 13, ship 14, ship 17, ship 18, ship 19. They are not afraid of, skipping over sets of vehicles. So I think after ship 20, barring any major bad things, the next ship that we've seen parts for beyond ship 21 is ship 24. There was like a nose cone barrel for ship 22 that we were talking about earlier, was spotted by Mary and looked like it could be a payload door Pathfinder kind of thing. But yeah, it at this point we just kind of have to wait and see what the next vehicles that come out are, right? I mean, I think ship 24 and booster 7 is not a unlikely pairing, put it that way. Would you guys agree, disagree?
I think you summarized it very well.
I should let you guys summarize it instead of flapping my own gums. My bad. Let's see here. Here's Six Strings is asking, do you think the chopsticks will do the next booster lift onto the mount, or the SpaceX crane, or a combination of both? Adrian, go first.
I think yes. I think what they're doing right now is to prepare for that. And I would totally, if somebody would tell me right now the next booster is going to be lifted by the chopsticks, I would say, yeah, of course.
Yeah, same here.
Entirely plausible. Let's see. Good question there from Six String Simpleton. Like a guitar thing. Let's see. And Crappy Ice, weird name, is asking about the thing between the chopsticks arm. We talked about that. Yeah, that's a recent addition, right? Like today edition.
Yeah, something to do with whatever testing they're doing now. Like we said, it looks like the same kind of mounting points that are on the vehicles, so it could be some sort of stacking test. Obviously, we're basing all this on what we can see, but it is a new addition that's probably involved with some sort of testing they're doing.
Makes sense. We've got a lot of questions. Here's one from Blankleron. Saying, what's happening with SpaceX's custom methane tanks? Will they be used on the first orbital attempt? And also, Fudgy Butter is asking, oh, no, wrong one. not Fudgy Butter, Mete Toth, I'm probably butchering that, is saying, have they ever filled the GSE tanks, the methane GSE tanks at the orbital tank farm? And if so, why not? Is there a problem with them? That's why they have the horizontal ones, I think is what they meant there. What's going on with the orbital tank farm? Who wants to open up that box of worms? I don't know. Adrian, go. Thomas, go. Somebody.
Well, you can tell us both to go.
Uh,
I don't know how much we've actually heard definitively. I know rumors have been going around about various things. What we have seen visually is lots of testing with them. We've seen venting from that side of the complex. So,
but no
and
methane delivered yet, I think is the case. And Michael is drawing a X over the requisite
Michael, what does
tanks
that mean? That's not clear communication.
Also, I'm pretty sure isn't that a LOX tank? Oh god, and now I'm like getting things reversed. I think the CH4 is
Like-
on the right side, but I could be wrong.
No, that's like the other angle. I think like we're looking right now.
Okay, got it.
That's reversed.
But yeah,
But, the X that Michael draws is not giving me any hope right now.
Right.
yeah. I mean, suffice to say, there are rumors that there are issues with the methane tanks at the orbital tank farm, and that is why we saw those large horizontal tanks delivered. And we'll have to keep our eyes open on Starbase Live. Shout out to Starbase Live, our 24/7 live stream from Boca Chica, to see if and when methane is delivered to the orbital tank farm, because that's not something I believe that we've seen yet.
Right. And I mean, that's just another part of getting ready for orbital flight readiness. It's the ready for rain. That was a terrible sentence. You know what I meant. Getting those tanks up and running, or getting whatever tanks they're going to use up and running, is part of that. And this is the first time they're building a Starship orbital complex, which they're building from scratch. It's not like, at Pad 40 and 39A at Cape Canaveral or 4 East at Vandenberg, where you were building on existing pad infrastructure for the most part. This is all SpaceX built infrastructure, and so it's possible that they actually learned things during that process and said, "Oh, actually, we need to do this slightly differently." Wouldn't be that surprising. They're obviously working through that. Visually, like you said, we haven't seen signs that said that they're ready. That say the tanks are ready to go. So maybe there are issues. We're just gonna have to keep watching them as they continue testing them, and see how they hook up the tanks that were delivered and any other forward work as they get closer to the list of items that need to be tested prior to flight anyway. The tanks are not the sole thing to be paying attention to anyway. Hopefully they're not any sort of limiting factor as they work through chopsticks testing and just preparing the launch mount and the vehicle readiness, of course. There's so many things to keep an eye on. It's definitely a watch item, but it's not like something we're going to make a big deal out of because they're some confirmed giant issue with them or anything like that. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, that makes sense.
It's just something else to watch, yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I have a side note here. If there was any doubt that the QD arm was in the way of the chopsticks, we can put that to bed right now, because the chopsticks are higher than the QD arm right now. So that question we can now confirm. Nope, they're not.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm glad we were able to put that one to bed. And this view, I think, right here is a shot from Mary with her camera out there. She's, of course, Boca Chica resident, Boca Chica gal. That's what we call her. That's her Twitter handle. That's Mary. Lives out there, constantly out there with her camera every single day. So thanks to her for rolling out there and putting up a camera for us to have this excellent view of this chopstick and QD action. It's cool to see, I'm really happy to see yet another milestone achieved in Starbase, no matter how big or small. All of these are steps along the way to orbital flight.
To be fair, chopsticks are pretty big.
Yeah. I mean, they're kind of necessary, right?
The humor in this episode is just doing this.
What did you expect with this lineup? Like,
and I've had a lot of coffee. I don't know if you can tell. Woo! It's caffeine. So Michael J is asking, why do you think the berm is being removed? It's not the first time we've seen a berm sort of built and then yanked out by SpaceX. I mean, if you ask me, it's because the plans and site layout are fluid and constantly changing. I don't know what you guys think.
And of course, put out the wild speculation banner. It could be connected with the GSC work and working with either new tanks or working on the old ones. It's possible that Berm is going to be removed so to make way for some extra ground equipment to get the ground fueling systems up and running, or some other GSC, just reworking the overall layout. There's any number of reasons, but my speculative guess would be to make room for GSC adjustments and GSC design changes. That's my
yeah.
purely speculative guess.
That would make sense to me. Good question there from Michael J. Really quick, Daryl Ames, thank you for becoming a Red Team member. As a Red Team member, you get preview videos, you get pictures, and you get cool members-only chat emoji. I'm going to throw a Gwen into chat. Or Gwyn? I always forget. Is it Gwen or Gwyn?
It's Gwyn.
Thank you. Gwyn Shotwell. There we go. So yeah, enjoy the chat emoji and the various other perks. Thanks for becoming a member. Musical Wolves, thank you for the support. They're saying Booster 7 for Ship 24. We were talking about that a little bit ago, right? I think that's the current expected pairing for those two vehicles.
I mean, mostly speculative, but it seems to be tracking kind of that direction, yeah. And that'd be the next pair beyond Booster 4 and Ship 20. Yeah.
Very cool.
And that's based mostly on Ship 20. Like, if Ship 21 was not in this weird limbo position, I'd say Booster 5 and Ship 21 also go together. But it's just the weirdness around Ship 21 not actually being completed is kind of making me think that might get skipped. Of course, it depends on if Ship 20 suffers some sort of issue. I'm sure they could finish Ship 21, So there's lots of options that all depend on everything that happens before it, as usual in Starbase.
Yeah,
Just at some point I stopped caring about the numbering SpaceX gave to vehicles in any shape or form in Starbase, because let's be real, it will change in 2 months or so.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just like the vehicles, don't expect the Starships to always look like they currently look. I mean, even Elon has tweeted about the addition of more Raptor vac engines or stretching the tanks. I mean, this is very much a system that is a prototype still, and things could change. Things will change. Don't expect things to look like this forever. I mean, every now and then I'll go back and look at my old photos from 2021 or 2020, and it's like, wow, a completely chrome Starship with no heat shield tiles looks really weird now. But for a long time, that was the norm. It's just one of those things with a development program such as this. Is there anything else we want to hit with Starship? Somebody vamp while I look for more questions.
I'm just trying to think because we came into this episode just knowing that we were all in the mood for rampant speculation, and so we already talked about orbital flight tests. We believe that's going to happen this year. We're on the fence about whether they'll get the payloads this year. So here's the other point. We're looking at Starbase. The other big thing that's come up relatively recently is like, oh yeah, Starship is finally coming back to Florida for sure. Time frame. Who wants to guess? First launch of the Starship system from Florida. What year?
2024.
23 and 24.
I
mean, just think about how long it's taken them to build out the orbital launch pad at Boca Chica.
When did like orbital launch mount work start?
Oh God. I want to say
tower, whichever one
I want to
started
say
first.
at the beginning of 2021.
Yeah.
Sometime in that time frame, we were seeing like the pilings being driven and the base of the launch tower concrete being poured for that. And I don't even know. It depends on if you want to call that the start or not, because there had to be land clearing that occurred before that. It might have even been 2020. I'm seeing in the back channel. I could be getting that wrong. So it takes a depressingly long time. Again, stupid human timescales to build out this infrastructure. So, well,
I think
also-
it will be less long than it took in Boca, because Boca obviously was the first time. And if
Yep.
they're just going to build the same launch tower and the same catch system and all that in Cape Canaveral, I would hope that just takes less time.
Yeah.
I think
Sorry, go ahead.
I think a couple years, like 2024 time frame, as a no earlier than point for that is probably reasonable. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I've seen a lot of comments. It's like, oh, Starship first test flight is this year. They'll launch Starlinks by the end of the year. First launch from they're coming back to Cape Canaveral, so that'll happen this year. And I'm like, hold on. Yes, all of this is happening, but those you're just you're throwing out timeframes that are saying like, oh, yeah, all this is happening this year. That's not reasonable. Um, I think zero chance they launch from Florida this year.
Correct.
But I think 2024 might be reasonable. It also just depends on, what the priorities are. If they need that launch site for things other than the human landing system missions, then maybe they launch even soon. They expedite that and try to go even sooner. I think if HLS is the primary motivation for that launch site, at least in the short term, then 2024 seems like a good time frame for launch readiness there, seeing as that's when those missions are kind of slated to get going. So it works out that way, but just throwing out another speculation question there. So cool, 2024 or 2023.
Yeah,
I think-
I'm more in the later camp because with Starbase they had a lot of problems with getting workforce. For example,
Yeah.
they always try to recruit, they try to bring in new people, try to train more people, and it's not like, yeah, I know there's probably more space flight industry in Florida compared to Boca Chica, Texas, but that doesn't mean that will just be easy to have like a giant team that right away will start building starships. They needed to learn that in Starbase. They will need to learn that again in Florida and need to train people how to do this. So that will take some time, and maybe the first vehicle they build will not even be perfect. It will maybe just be for practice. So that's always part of this process, and yeah, workforce is another important point they need to get these prototypes and these vehicles ready.
Yeah, very good point. I will hedge and say if 2023, probably on the latter half of the year, if not the end of the year, for a launch from 49 or from the Cape. So really quick, let's do a couple more questions here because y'all are asking some good ones. Raphael is asking, will the Raptor's sea level in Starship only be used for landing? They're also used in launch, right?
I mean,
Sea level like they fire all Raptors for Starship after stage SEP. I think is something that.
I'm sorry, I completely did not understand the question at first. Yes, I mean, I still don't think we've gotten the like officially firm answer on this, but I believe all of the Raptors are used during ascent on Starship, and only the sea levels are used for landing.
Yeah.
But I believe the sea levels are also used not only for just extra thrust, but because the vacuum Raptors don't gimbal for attitude control during the ascent, they use the sea level Raptors.
Yep. Yeah, and maybe the question was meant to ask or clarify if the vacuum Raptors will be used for landing, and I think we can say the answer there is probably no. But
correct, because they don't have gimbal.
Correct. So cool. Good question there from Raphael. Here's one. Here's an easy answer. Aaron is asking, will there be multiple orbital launch towers at Starbase? Yes.
Eventually, the official plans show 2 at least.
Yep.
So that's the plan.
Every now and then when we're labeling the daily videos, I'm tempted to say orbital pad A, because just like on the suborbital pad where there's a suborbital side where there's pad A and pad B, there is plans for a orbital pad A and an orbital pad B, including a redundant tank farm, a redundant landing pad, redundant tower and mount. So it's only a matter of time, I think, before we start seeing that sort of thing pop up. It's just a matter of if and when. So
it maybe need a second one if catching goes bad.
Yeah, good point.
Like,
it's a very good point. Let's see. And to tie all that back in, we are waiting for the FAA to come back with SpaceX at the end of February with their determination on if they're going to need a oh my God, what is it? We're waiting for FAA to say yay or nay, and if they say yay and give SpaceX a FONSI, a finding of no significant impact, that one I remember because FONSI, then we're in good shape. But if SpaceX comes back and says no, we need to do a full environmental assessment, that could delay things. And but in that document, in the thing that SpaceX submitted to the FAA, that is where we have seen the details of a second launch tower and details of a second orbital tank farm and all of that. So I think part of that also depends on what the FAA says. We'll sort of have to wait and see there. Hopefully we find out soon, though. I mean, end of February sounds like really far away, but then I look at the calendar and it's like, oh God, it's January 9th. Oh. So time, what is it? Why does it go so fast? Let's see. I think we're pretty good on Starship. I think we ran through a lot of that. Daryl Ames is asking, do they need a taller tower for stretch tanks? Oh God. Oh God. Oh God.
Well,
They do need a taller wide bay or a taller high bay for the boosters. If you remember, they cut the ring off of they cut one ring off of booster 1 to get it out of the high bay because it straight up didn't fit.
yeah, do we
I-
know like how much clearance they built themselves with the current launch
I
tower?
don't think we do, but if you look at the photos from the stack
It's
of
like
ship,
not that much, right?
yeah, if you look at the photos of the stack of ship 20 on booster 4 back when they did that in August, they're basically the same height as the tower. I mean, maybe a little bit shorter. So
I mean, for sure they wouldn't forget about such things and or just change the whole tower design again and need to rebuild the whole tower or something, right? That would
I
be.
do wonder if they could unbolt the top of the tower and plop another section on there.
Yeah, that might be feasible, I guess.
But then
there
they've
is
spent
a
all
lot
this
of
time.
wiring.
Yeah, thank you. They've spent all this time reeving the cables. I mean, those chopsticks aren't moving themselves. There's a big block and
Yeah.
set of cabling that is required. So they would have to undo a lot of work in order to get that done. So maybe the second tower is a taller tower, and they use that one for stretched ships, and they use the current tower for ships that aren't stretched. So, and I'm
We'll
getting
see.
DM'd here on Discord. Interesting. Somebody saying, I don't even, who is this? Somebody saying they could move the mounts on the ship. I mean, I suppose that's plausible. That's the first time. There you go. You win, person, for being the first person to DM me during NSF Live.
Oh, well, you
nice.
just opened yourself up to way more messages when
Yeah,
you're
what
on
have I
air
done?
now.
What have I done?
Please don't do that.
Yeah, a little bit distracting, but thank you for the input. Cool. So that's Starbase, that's Starship. Very excited to see how the rest of the year pans out. But let's see. I think next up we want to talk about Falcon Heavy Side Booster spotted at McGregor, right?
Yeah, I wanted to highlight this just quickly because, of course, Regan Beck out there who lives near McGregor spotted a new core going up at McGregor, which is of course, not that rare of an occurrence. That's where all the boosters go to get tested before being shipped for their first flights. However, this booster, which we're presuming is 1072, just based on the sequence of boosters that we've seen so far, is painted in the scheme of a Falcon Heavy side booster, which is interesting. It would indicate that 1073 will probably also be a side booster, assuming they manufacture two at a time. And it's just prompting some speculation as to what mission this might end up flying. Right now, there are two flown Falcon Heavy side boosters that are in the fleet, one of which we saw get converted to a Falcon 9, that's booster 1052. Of course, these two boosters both flew on Arabsat and STP-2. And so one of them converted to a Falcon 9. We'll have to see what mission that one ends up flying. The other one is in a hangar at Cape Canaveral, awaiting either conversion or to sit around and wait for another Falcon Heavy flight. And then we've seen the 3 Falcon Heavy stages for USSF 44. The center core will not be recovered, but the 2 side boosters will be on that mission, nominally, of course. There's then another center core, booster 1068, which gives you back 3 full Falcon Heavy stages, if you will, available for flight. There's another center core, 1070, after that, and now we're adding another side booster. You'll have under this, so it looks like you'll have at least 2 sets of side boosters in the running to support the next couple of Falcon Heavy missions. Depending on all the requirements, we know USSF 44 doesn't recover the center core, but beyond that, some of the recovery capability of the different Falcon Heavy missions that are coming up are not super definitive or known. So a lot of this is depending on how many of these stages they get back. Not only intentionally, but sometimes unintentionally. Center core recovery has not been something they've been had the opportunity to really iron out yet anyway. But this year will provide that opportunity because we're looking at up to 5 Falcon Heavy missions this year. Will they hit all 5? Probably not, but they've got multiple DoD missions. They've got Psyche launching this year, which, oh my goodness, very excited for that mission, as well as potential commercial satellites as well. So, I don't know, any anyone want to play the game of what mission will these boosters fly?
I don't know
I
about
mean,
what mission, but if you told me there's going to be 3 Falcon Heavy flights this year of the planned 5 or potential 5,
That
I
would
would
still be
say,
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's 1, still great, 2, completely plausible, and 3, 2022. I mean, it could end up being the year of Falcon Heavy. That'd be really cool. Adrian, sorry, I interrupted you.
I mean, with potentially 5, they are basically getting close to where you need to have more side boosters in the rotation, right? Because you won't be able to always just refurbish the side boosters and use them on the next mission.
Sure.
Just on timeline wise. So, what maybe they're preparing a second set. Just they can basically rotate these size boosters in and out.
And like alternate between flights.
Yeah, so they get more refurbish and recovery time between those flights. Because I mean, we are talking with potentially 5 flights, we are talking about less than 70, 80 days between flights potentially, and then it gets kind of hard to maybe have these always ready for the next flight.
God,
And
you're making me so
also
excited.
worth mentioning that, I mean, obviously they're building on a lot of Block 5 data at this point. Side boosters have, at least compared to the Centaur or compared to normal Falcon 9 missions, usually are easier recoveries. So if they return to launch site, obviously that's like the least stressful recovery profile. The reentry is the least harsh, and you're not dealing with drone ship, sea state, anything like that. So hopefully that reduces turnaround time, and we've seen with Falcon 9 their turnaround time has been decreasing a lot. So hopefully that'll aid as well. I also wonder, because obviously Falcon Heavies require 39A, the other missions that require 39A are the Dragon missions. But Dragon missions are the schedule is pretty well defined and they're relatively well spaced out. So I wonder if they're going to want to take advantage of the time between those missions, because you have to convert the Erector to the Falcon Heavy configuration. Obviously, which is not like an extensive overhaul, but it's non-zero amount of work to transition between Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. I wonder if they'll try to stack Falcon Heavy launches between the Dragon missions to reduce the conversion time between the two different configurations, which could result in like rapid fire Falcon Heavy missions.
It's going to be crazy if that pans out, because at this point, Falcon Heavy has flown, what, 3 times?
3 times total.
And it's still, each time
it might
happens,
more than double its number of launches total this year.
which is wild. But yeah, each time it's flown so far, it's kind of been like, oh my gosh, it's a Falcon Heavy. If it flies 5 times or even 3 times this year, by the end of the year, no one's going to care. Like, yep, another Falcon Heavy. Go rocket, go.
Right, and I'm wondering, like, because we don't have that reaction to Delta IV Heavy right now, right? It's the other giant tricore rocket that handles the heaviest lift payloads, but it's flown, what, 12 times now?
Something like that, 12, 13
Never
times.
flew, I think, more than once a year, right?
Well, right, so as far as launch cadence goes, but it's not a new rocket. I wouldn't even call Falcon Heavy a new rocket. It will be interesting this year just because there's been a lull, and I also think that coincides with what we were talking about earlier with Starship testing. There was a slew of Starship test flights that happened, and now we're in a lull. Falcon Heavy kind of did the same thing. It had some original demo flight and then 2 missions, and then we went all of 2021 without a single launch. And now in 2022, we're ramping back up. I'm wondering if Starship will follow a similar pattern of, you thought that was a lull? Here's orbital test flights, which are just craziness.
So exciting.
And Falcon Heavy might be ramping back up in that sense.
I mean, it's always what I feel like we talked, especially on Endless of Life, about Falcon Heavy and why it launched so little before. It always takes time for like the market to adjust to a new capability, right? And to payloads to become available.
Which was a huge part of Falcon Heavy.
Yeah. You still have these contracts. I mean, Falcon Heavy is getting contracts in the last 12 months a lot. So the market is still learning about Falcon Heavy and basically thinking about how to use it. And now we are probably reaching the time where all of these missions, all of these payloads that are now utilizing this new capability and new price probably are just coming ready, and now we are getting close to seeing the full potential of Falcon Heavy that SpaceX probably hoped for when they designed it.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
you better believe there's going to be a similar situation with Starship where there will be some lag between Starship coming online and people and companies having payloads that take advantage of it fully. But that's
Which
part of
may
the
be
beauty.
masked a bit by Starlink because
But-
SpaceX can provide. SpaceX already knows
Yep,
everything about the Starship capabilities, so
yep.
they can provide payloads to maybe mask the fact that there's a lull. But once we eventually get the customer missions, whether that's satellites or the Artemis contracts or anything like that.
Yeah, you beat me to it because that's exactly what I was going to say. Is that's sort of the beauty of utilizing Starship for Starlink is that they have payloads ready.
Right.
Payloads that ideally will result in them having a significant return on their investment of both systems. It looks like those chopsticks have stopped way
Yep.
up there near the top of the tower, which is quite a sight. I mean, what? I always love seeing new developments in Boca Chica. How great is that? Let's see. So many questions, so little time. We're coming up on the end here. Uh, let's see. Do we think the first orbital test will be a full success? Launch, orbit, and soft landing of booster and ship in the water?
I was about to ask define success, so I
Yeah.
could wiggle out. Thomas, you want to start?
Oh yeah, sure. Thanks, Adrian. Soft landing. I'm not. Have we even confirmed that they're attempting a soft landing?
With the booster, I think yes. With the ship, I'm not sure.
Okay. Um. Gosh. I am pretty confident that they'll stage successfully. They'll reach orbit. Um. I'm honestly reasonably confident in reentry too. Um. You know what? I'll have a leap of faith. Yes, full success on the first orbital test flight.
I think the booster will work perfectly and perform a soft splashdown in the ocean. I think the ship will break up during re-entry, and they will have to fix something about the heat shield. That's my prediction.
I should also point out if they attempt soft landings, I think they'll be successful. But I also just wouldn't be surprised if, like, post reentry, it just belly flops straight into the ocean or something. Just depending on what they're actually going to attempt to do on that flight. But I have some faith.
I'm going to be extremely weaselly here and say partial success. What that means, viewer's choice. But
okay, you could argue like any test flight has been a partial success.
Hey, as long as you get data, baby.
I feel like somebody is wiggling
Jack
out.
is predicting that. Jack's prediction is that SpaceX will get data from the first test flight. What a bold prediction!
I know, right? I'm really going out on a limb here. All right. Well, I mean, I think that was an action-packed episode, the second NSF live episode of the year. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this broadcast. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, especially to all of our members, our launch director members, and our flight engineers. You can see all of the names there. Thank you so much to all of our members for enabling us to do what we do around the world, which I can say now because Chris G. Gianna. Seriously. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching. And with that, let's all go hang out at Starbase Live and watch some chopstick testing. See you later, nerds.
Thanks for watching, everybody.